There was a moment, maybe you remember it exactly, when you looked at this person and thought, why does loving them feel like standing outside in the cold, pressing my face against the glass of a warm house that I'm never allowed to enter? You tried everything. You were patient, you were understanding, you showed up when they didn't deserve it, you loved them on their worst days, you made yourself smaller so they could feel bigger, you gave and gave and gave. And still, something was always missing. Not just for you, but between you. And here's the part that made it even more confusing. In the beginning, it felt like the greatest love you'd ever experienced. They made you feel chosen, special, seen in a way nobody ever had before. So what happened? Here's what nobody tells you. The reason you could never feel fully loved by a narcissist has nothing to do with you. It's not because you weren't enough. It's not because you didn't try hard enough. It's not because love wasn't possible between you. It's because of something that happened to them long before you ever arrived. And understanding this, really understanding it, won't just explain the relationship. It will finally set you free from it. Let's start with something that will change the way you see everything that happened. A narcissist does not experience love the way you do. Not because they're evil, not because they're monsters, but because somewhere in their early development, in childhood, in those first critical years, when a human being learns what love is and what it feels like, something went deeply, fundamentally wrong. And that wound, that original fracture, is the invisible thread running through everything they ever did to you. Think of it this way. Imagine a child who grows up in a house where the heating is broken, not dramatically broken, nobody's freezing to death, but cold enough, consistently enough, that the child never learns what warmth actually feels like. They grow up. They move into their own home. They meet people. They enter relationships. And they genuinely don't understand why everyone keeps saying something is missing, because they have no internal reference point for what warmth is supposed to feel like. That's what emotional neglect in childhood does to a developing personality. It doesn't just hurt the child, it removes their blueprint for intimacy entirely. And now, as an adult, as the person you fell in love with, they are trying to build a house with no blueprint. And the result looks like love from the outside. It performs like love. It speaks the language of love, but it cannot hold heat because they were never taught how. This is where the concept of narcissistic supply comes in. And once you understand this, you will never look at that relationship the same way again. Picture a car with a broken fuel tank. No matter how much gas you pour in, it leaks out immediately. The tank can never stay full. The car can never run for long. And the driver, confused, desperate, furious, keeps stopping at every gas station they can find, demanding more fuel, unable to understand why nothing is working. That's the narcissist, emotional world. The admiration, the attention, the love, the validation you gave them, all of it was fuel. And the moment you stopped pouring, the moment you had a bad day, the moment you needed them instead of giving to them, the tank ran dry. And suddenly, you weren't a person anymore. You were a broken gas station. Psychology today describes this inner world as a bottomless pit, a void so deep the narcissist isn't even fully conscious of it, but expects everyone around them to fill. Psychoanalyst Darlene Lancer describes trying to love a narcissist as thankless, like trying to fill a hole that has no bottom. And you felt that, didn't you? You felt yourself pouring in and watching it disappear, trying more, giving more, wondering what you were doing wrong. You weren't doing anything wrong. You were simply trying to fill something that structurally cannot be filled. But here's where it gets deeper, because the question nobody asks is, why is the tank broken in the first place? To answer that, we have to go back, way back. At the heart of nearly every narcissistic personality, beneath the confidence, the charm, the arrogance, the control, there is a child. A wounded child who was never taught that they were lovable just as they were. Maybe they grew up in a home where love was conditional, where affection was a reward for performance, not a given. where being emotional was weakness, where approval had to be earned every single day and could be taken away without warning. Or maybe the opposite happened. Maybe they were placed on a pedestal so high that nobody ever taught them they were human, that they could fail, that they were allowed to be ordinary. Either way, the result is the same. The child never developed what psychologists call a stable internal self. They never learned to generate their own sense of worth from the inside. So the adult they became can only feel real, can only feel worthy, significant, alive, when it's reflected back at them through someone else's eyes. They don't love you. They love what seeing themselves through your admiring eyes does to them. And this is where things change. Because what looks like arrogance on the surface is actually the opposite. Research from City St. George's University of London found that despite projecting enormous confidence, narcissistic people are actually unable to convince themselves of their own worth. The bravado isn't real belief, it's armor. And underneath that armor is a person who, at their core, believes they are fundamentally unlovable. Think about that for a moment. The person who made you feel like you were never enough secretly believes the exact same thing about themselves. Now here's the part that explains why the relationship felt the way it did, why it started like a dream and ended like a nightmare, why no matter what you did, you could never quite reach them. There's a pattern that almost every relationship with a narcissist follows. Psychologists call it the Idealize-Devalue-Discard Cycle, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. In the beginning, the idealization phase, everything feels electric. They call it love bombing, and that name is exactly right. You are flooded. Compliments, attention, intensity, connection, they make you feel like the most important person who has ever existed. Like they've been waiting their whole life for someone exactly like you. And here's the thing, it feels real, because in that moment, to them, it is. You are new supply, fresh fuel. Your admiration is untainted, your attention is fully theirs, and your love is meeting the bottomless hunger inside them in a way that feels, temporarily, like relief. Your brain responds to this with a flood of dopamine and oxytocin, attachment chemicals, the same chemicals that bond a mother to a newborn. You are not weak for falling for this. You are neurologically wired to respond to this level of attention and intensity. Your brain was doing exactly what it was built to do. But the narcissist can't maintain this. The mask always slips. And when it does, the devaluation phase begins. Picture this. You're sitting across from them at dinner. It's an ordinary Tuesday night. You say something, maybe a small joke, maybe a gentle observation about your day. Something you would have said 100 times before, and they would have laughed. But tonight, they look at you differently. A slow, cold look. And then, that's actually kind of embarrassing. I can't believe you think that's funny. And you go quiet. You feel the air leave the room. You spend the rest of the evening trying to figure out what you did wrong, replaying the moment, adjusting, apologizing for something you're not even sure requires an apology. That's how devaluation begins. Not with a dramatic fight, with a single cold look on a Tuesday that makes you question your own reality. The criticism starts quietly. A comment here, a dismissal there. Suddenly you're doing things wrong that you were doing right last week. Suddenly the things they loved about you are the things they resent. You find yourself walking on eggshells, monitoring your words before you say them, reading the room before you enter it, shrinking yourself in ways you don't even notice you're doing. And you keep trying to get back to the version of them that made you feel so loved. But that version was never the full truth of who they are. It was a role they played, and roles exhaust even the best performers. What makes this so psychologically damaging is the contrast. Research shows that the human brain finds intermittent reward, love one day, coldness the next, more addictive than consistent reward. It's the same mechanism behind slot machines. The unpredictability doesn't drive you away. It keeps you locked in, trying harder, hoping more, waiting for the version of them you fell in love with to come back. And sometimes they do come back, just long enough to make you believe again. Here's where most people misunderstand this. Most people assume that when a narcissist hurts you, they know exactly what they're doing, that they're sitting somewhere, cold and calculated, deliberately pulling your strings. Sometimes that's true, but more often, and this is the uncomfortable part, they genuinely don't see it. Here's why. Narcissists have a profound deficit in something psychologists call affective empathy. Not all empathy, they can often read what you're feeling, they can identify your emotions with precision, but they cannot feel it with you. The emotional bridge that allows one person to truly step inside another's experience and be moved by it. In a narcissist, that bridge is broken or severely underdeveloped. Neuroscience research shows structural differences in the brain regions associated with emotional processing and compassion in people with narcissistic personality disorder. This isn't an excuse, but it is an explanation. They are not choosing to be unmoved by your pain. They are largely incapable of being moved by it in the way you need. So when you were hurting, when you needed them to show up, when you were desperate for them to just see you, they weren't pretending not to see. On some level, they genuinely couldn't. And you kept reaching for something that was never fully there. Now comes the discard, and this is the part that leaves the deepest scars. At some point, the narcissist determines that you are no longer producing enough supply. Maybe you started setting boundaries. Maybe you stopped being as available. Maybe you became too familiar, too human, to hold the mirror they needed you to be. And so they leave, often suddenly, often brutally, often without real explanation. You're left standing in the wreckage, trying to piece together what happened, replaying every conversation, searching for the moment it all turned, while they've already moved on to someone new who looks at them the way you used to. But here's the part that is somehow even worse than the leaving. Sometimes they come back, not with a full return, not with real accountability, just enough, a text at midnight, a memory they couldn't stop thinking about, a version of the person you fell in love with flickering back into view for just long enough to reignite everything you'd been working to let go of. This is called hoovering, named after the vacuum cleaner, because they are sucking you back in. And every time it happens, the cycle resets. Your nervous system floods with hope. The attachment chemicals fire again. You tell yourself this time is different. This time they've changed. This time the love bombing is real. And then they leave again. And the second loss cuts deeper than the first, because this time you knew better and you still stayed. So now you're not just grieving the relationship, you're grieving your own judgment. You're questioning whether you can trust yourself at all. That self-doubt, quiet, corrosive, relentless, is one of the most lasting wounds narcissistic relationships leave behind. Not the dramatic moments, the slow erosion of your trust in your own perception of reality. And you're left with isn't just a broken relationship, it's a broken sense of yourself. You start to wonder if you imagine the good parts. You start to wonder if the bad parts were your fault. You start to wonder, and this is the cruelest result of all, whether you are even capable of being loved. You are, let me say that clearly, you are. Here's the truth that nobody in your life may have said to you yet. The love you gave was real. The connection you felt was real. The pain you're carrying is real. But you were not loving a person who was fully available to be loved. You were pouring yourself into someone whose capacity for intimacy had been fractured long before you arrived. And no amount of love, patience, understanding, or sacrifice was ever going to fill what childhood broke inside them. That is not a failure of your love. That is a fact about their damage. You were never the problem. So where does that leave you? The first thing that has to happen is understanding, not forgiving. You don't owe anyone forgiveness on a timeline, but understanding. Because as long as you believe their behavior was about your worth, you will keep carrying wounds that belong entirely to them. The second thing is grief, real grief. Not just for the relationship, but for the version of it you believed was possible. For the person they pretended to be in the beginning. For the love you gave that was received as fuel instead of as the gift it was. And the third, the hardest one, is recognizing how this pattern found you. Because narcissists don't choose their partners randomly. They tend to be drawn to people with a high capacity for empathy, people who are patient, people who believe in others, people who, often because of their own early experiences, have learned to equate love with effort, people who stay when they should leave because somewhere along the way they learned that love has to be earned through endurance. If that sounds like you, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something hurt you too once. And healing that might be the most important thing you ever do. Because here is what's on the other side of this. When you finally understand why you couldn't feel loved by a narcissist, not because love wasn't possible, but because they were never fully capable of giving it, something shifts. The question stops being, what was wrong with me? And starts being, what was I teaching myself that love is supposed to feel like? And that question, quiet, uncomfortable, completely personal, is where everything changes. You deserve to feel loved without having to earn it every single day. You deserved a person who could receive your love and give it back, not as performance, not as fuel management, not as strategic affection designed to keep you close enough to be useful. You deserved someone whose love didn't come with a leak. And somewhere, once you've done the work of understanding all of this, once you've grieved what was real and released what wasn't, you'll find that you haven't just healed from that relationship. You've finally learned what love is actually supposed to feel like. And you'll never settle for anything less again. If this gave you language for something you've been carrying alone, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes understanding is the beginning of everything. And if you want to go deeper, the next video covers exactly how to tell the difference between someone who loves you and someone who only needs you. It's the video that comes after the healing begins. It's already waiting.